The morning after the funeral, I woke to the sound of drawers slamming. My heart lurched. I thought maybe grief had finally broken me and I was hearing ghosts. But when I walked into the hallway, I saw them. Howard, my father-in-law, and his youngest son already hauling my husband's clothes into black trash bags. "This isn't yours anymore, Claire," Howard said without looking at me. His voice was flat, final, like a verdict. "The property reverts to blood family now." I clutched the door frame, trying to steady myself. "What are you talking about? This is my home. Michael wanted me here." Howard paused long enough to glance at me, his mouth curling into something that wasn't quite a smile. "You're not blood. You were just married in. You'll need to gather your things." His words cut sharper than the burial earth still clinging to my shoes. My husband hadn't even been gone a week, and already they were stripping me bare, as if my years with him meant nothing, as if love carried no weight at all. I'm glad you're here. If you're cozy with the story so far, please like, subscribe to Tears Within, and let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from. We'll weave the next part together. I wanted to scream, to tear the bags from their hands, but grief had dulled my strength. My knees wobbled beneath me. "Michael and I built this life together," I whispered, barely able to hear myself. "Michael was my son," Howard shot back, his hands tightening on the bag. "Bloodline carries on, you do not." Daniel, the middle brother, stood behind him, shifting uneasily but saying nothing. His silence was worse than any insult. It told me I was already erased. I stumbled back into the kitchen where the coffee pot sat cold and untouched, the mugs we'd used together still drying on the rack. Everything screamed of Michael, yet the people who shared his name looked right through me. By afternoon, they had stripped half the house, his jackets, his tools, even the framed photographs. I stood on the porch, arms wrapped around myself as they loaded the truck. Howard climbed into the cab, leaning out the window to deliver his final words. "You can stay a few days, but don't make this harder than it needs to be. The farm belongs to us now." The truck roared down the gravel drive, leaving a cloud of dust that blurred the horizon. I sank onto the porch steps, the boards rough beneath me. My chest felt hollow, as though they had packed my heart into one of those black bags. All night I wandered the farmhouse, touching the places where Michael's hands had lingered. The worn arm of the couch, the cabinet he had built for my spices, the dent in the hallway wall from when we had carried the bed in together and laughed so hard we cried. Every memory was alive, yet the people who should have shared them had decided I no longer belonged. The next morning, I found the first envelope. It was tucked in Michael's desk, beneath the stack of unpaid bills. My name was written in his familiar slanted script. My breath caught as I opened it, the paper trembling in my hands. "Claire, if you're reading this, it means I'm not there to shield you. I'm so sorry. You need to know the truth. I changed everything. They can't touch the house, the farm, or the practice. It's all yours. I left it that way for a reason." The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. My chest tightened, not just from grief, but from the shock of being seen. Michael had known his father's cruelty. He had known what was coming, and he had acted. I pressed the letter to my lips, my heart pounding. Maybe I wasn't powerless after all. Maybe he had left me more than just memories. But even as hope flickered, fear pressed in. If Howard discovered this, he would never stop. And Daniel, quiet, pliable Daniel, might not protect me either. The letter felt like a torch in my hand, both a light and a danger. That day I searched the house, opening every drawer, flipping through every folder, as if Michael had left me a trail. At the back of the closet, behind the winter coats, I found a small lockbox, no key. I carried it to the desk and stared at it until the afternoon light faded. Howard's words echoed in my head. The property reverts to blood family, but Michael's letter whispered louder. "It's all yours." I set the box on the desk and laid my palm on it, a promise forming in my chest. I would find the key. I would find the truth. And when Howard came again, I would be ready. The lockbox sat on Michael's desk like a secret I wasn't ready to touch, yet couldn't stop staring at. Every time I walked by, it pulled at me, whispering of answers hidden inside. I tried the ring of keys we'd always kept by the back door, but none of them fit. I even hunted through the tool drawers, hoping for a spare I'd overlooked, but the lock held firm. That night, I lay awake in the bed that still smelled faintly of him, listening to the farmhouse creak in the wind. My hands ached with the urge to pry that box open. Yet something in me knew Michael hadn't meant for me to break it. He'd left a trail. I just had to follow it. The following morning, I drove into town. My steps felt heavy, walking through the grocery store aisles where neighbors stopped me with the same look in their eyes. Pity mixed with curiosity. A few offered condolences, but most glanced at my bare ring finger, at the hollowness in my face, and quickly looked away. Howard's whispers had already spread. At the checkout, Mrs. Green leaned close and whispered, "Howard was at the diner yesterday. Said you'd be leaving the farm soon. Is that true, Claire?" I swallowed hard. It's not his decision to make. She looked startled, then gave a quick nod. "Good for you, dear." But her eyes held doubt, and I knew the gossip would grow no matter what I said. Back home, I searched Michael's things again. In the pocket of his old barn coat, I found another envelope folded neatly as if he had placed it there knowing I'd find it one day. My name curved across the front in his hand. Inside, just a single line. "The key is where we started." My breath caught. Where we started. My mind raced back through our years together. The hospital where I worked when we met, the church where we married, the field behind the farmhouse where he first kissed me. But then I remembered the little cedar tree we had planted on our wedding day, down by the creek at the edge of the pasture. He had always called it our beginning. I pulled on my boots and walked out into the chill. The sun was slipping low, casting the fields in gold. The cedar tree stood taller now, its branches wide. Kneeling in the damp grass, I searched the soil around its roots. At first, there was nothing but earth and weeds. Then, beneath a small, flat stone, I found a rusted tin. Inside lay a brass key, cool against my fingers, and a note wrapped tightly around it. "Trust yourself, always." My knees buckled as relief surged through me. I carried the key back to the farmhouse, my heart pounding with every step. The lockbox clicked open with ease. Inside were stacks of documents, deeds, account statements, and a second will, notarized and signed. Michael had left everything to me. Not part, not temporary rights. Everything. The farmhouse, the land, even the veterinary practice in town. My hands shook as I read the pages. Disbelief and gratitude tangled in my chest. He had known his family would try to strip me bare, and he had made sure they couldn't. But at the very bottom of the box lay another envelope, heavier than the rest. My name on the front again, but this one sealed with wax. My hands hovered over it. I wanted to tear it open, but fear stopped me. If Michael had saved this for last, it must hold something even heavier than the truth I had just uncovered. I placed it back in the box for the moment, shutting the lid. The secret would wait until I had the strength to face it. The next day, Howard came back. His truck crunched up the gravel drive, and Daniel followed in his own. I stood on the porch as they climbed out, arms folded across my chest. Howard's face was hard. "We gave you time, Claire. Now it's done. Gather your things. You're leaving." "No," I said simply. His brows shot up. "No?" I held his gaze. "This is my home. Michael left it to me." Daniel shifted uncomfortably. "Dad, maybe we should—" "Quiet," Howard snapped. His eyes narrowed at me. "You think a marriage license makes you family? Blood is what matters, and you've got none of it." I clenched my fists, the letter from Michael echoing in my mind. "Trust yourself. Always. I don't need your permission to stay, and I don't need your definition of family to know what I am." For a moment, silence stretched between us. Howard's jaw clenched, and I saw the fury building in his eyes. "We'll see what the law has to say," he growled. He turned and stalked back to his truck, Daniel trailing behind, his face pale. The gravel spit beneath their tires as they roared away. I stood there on the porch, shaking from head to toe. Fear churned in my stomach, but beneath it was something else. Strength. Michael had trusted me. He had prepared me, and I would not let them take that away. That night, I opened the lockbox again and took out the sealed envelope. My hands trembled as I broke the wax. Inside was a letter longer than the others, written in Michael's steady hand. As my eyes moved across the page, the world seemed to tilt beneath me. He had left me not only the farm and the practice, but something else. Something that explained why his father's hatred cut so deep. Michael's words stared back at me, neat but heavy, every line pulling me deeper into the secret he had carried. Claire, if you are reading this, I need you to know what I never could say aloud. My father's cruelty has roots you don't see. He resented me long before you entered the family. The truth is, I wasn't the son he wanted me to be. Not in blood, not in spirit. He'll try to use that against you. But remember, the law is on your side, and love is stronger than blood. I pressed my hand over my mouth, trembling. The letter didn't spell it out completely, but I could read between the lines. Michael wasn't just talking about his father's disapproval. There was a deeper rift, something about heritage, about belonging. And now, Howard's obsession with blood family took on a darker meaning. He knew the truth, or at least pieces of it. And that was why he was so determined to strip me away. I read the letter again and again until the words blurred with my tears. Michael had carried this weight his whole life, and still he had managed to love me without reservation. I felt grief and fury in equal measure, grief that he had suffered in silence, and fury that Howard was still trying to punish him, even in death. The next morning, I decided I couldn't keep this hidden. I folded the letter and took it to Bill, an attorney I trusted from town. His office smelled of old wood and coffee, the kind of place where truths could settle without fear. I placed the letter and the deeds in front of him. He read carefully, his brow furrowing. Claire, this is strong. The will and trust documents are airtight. But this letter, he tapped it gently. It explains his father's hostility, but it's not something I'd put forward unless absolutely necessary. It could cut both ways. What do you mean? It humanizes Michael, shows his intent, but Howard could twist it. Say your husband doubted himself, wasn't of sound mind. He could use the very words meant to protect you as a weapon. I clenched my fists. So I stay silent while he tries to destroy me? Bill leaned forward. No, you stand your ground with the documents. That's all you need. Let Howard play with rumors. You'll have proof. I nodded, though unease still knotted in my chest. 2 days later, Howard came again. This time he didn't bother with politeness. He brought an envelope of his own, thick with papers. Eviction notice, he said flatly, thrusting it toward me. You'll be out in 30 days. My breath caught, but I forced myself to stay calm. I'm not leaving, Howard. Michael left this to me. I have the proof. His lip curled. You think some papers will change what's right? Property belongs to blood. Always has. I lifted my chin. Then you should know better than anyone. Michael wanted nothing to do with that. He chose me. For the first time, a flicker of something crossed his face. Fear, maybe, or anger, edged with panic. He slammed the screen door on his way out, the sound rattling through the farmhouse long after his truck pulled away. That night, Daniel came by without warning. He stood awkwardly in the doorway, his shoulders hunched. Dad's furious, he muttered. He says you've been hiding things. He says Michael didn't trust you enough to leave you anything. I felt the sting of betrayal in my chest. Do you believe him? Daniel hesitated, then shrugged. I don't know what to believe. I just know this is tearing us apart. I stepped closer, my eyes burning. Your brother trusted me. He left me everything because he knew your father would try to erase me. Don't let him twist that. Daniel's jaw worked, but he said nothing more. He left soon after, and I watched his taillights vanish down the road, my heart heavy with the knowledge that Howard's poison had already seeped deep. The next morning, I drove back to Bill's office. "He served me an eviction notice," I said, slamming the papers onto his desk. Bill scanned them quickly and shook his head. "Empty threats. He has no authority. We'll file our response in court and the judge will see the will and trust documents. Howard doesn't have a case." I let out a shaky breath, but my hands still trembled. "He'll make it ugly." Bill met my eyes. "Then you hold steady. You've already won in truth. Now you just have to stand firm until the law catches up." I left his office with my heart pounding. I had the proof. I had Michael's words. But I also had a secret that could fracture everything if it came out. Howard was circling, and sooner or later, he would strike where it hurt most. That night, I sat by the cedar tree we had planted on our wedding day. The air was cool, the branches whispering above me. I whispered back, as if Michael could still hear me. "You trusted me to carry this, but I don't know if I'm strong enough." The wind rustled, lifting the edges of my hair, and for a moment I felt steadier. But deep inside, I knew the storm was only beginning. The courthouse smelled of old wood and dust, the kind that seemed to cling to everything inside. I sat on a hard bench with the papers folded neatly in my lap, my fingers tracing the edges again and again. Bill was beside me, calm as always, though I could see the set of his jaw. Howard walked in a few minutes later, flanked by Daniel and his older brother, their steps heavy, their expressions grim. They didn't look at me, but the chill of their presence pressed hard against my chest. The judge called us forward, his voice tired but firm. Bill handed over the trust and the notarized will. Howard's attorney, a sharp-faced man from the city, argued that the documents were invalid, that Michael had been unduly influenced in his final years. His words slithered through the room, casting shadows on my grief. When the judge asked if I had anything to say, I rose on trembling legs. "Your Honor, my husband made his choice clearly. He left the farm, the practice, and the home to me. He did so because he loved me, and because he knew his family would try to take it away. This isn't about influence. This is about honoring his voice." My own words surprised me. They rang louder, clearer than I expected. The judge nodded slightly before announcing that he would review the documents and schedule a further hearing. For now, nothing would change. Outside, the air was sharp with winter wind. Howard stormed past me without a word, but Daniel lingered, his face pale. "Why are you fighting us, Claire?" he asked quietly. "Because Michael wanted me to," I replied. His mouth twisted. "Or because you want everything for yourself?" The words cut deep. I wanted to scream that I never wanted this battle, that I would give anything to have Michael back instead of deeds and papers. But Daniel had already turned away, following his father down the courthouse steps. That evening, back at the farmhouse, I sat at Michael's desk and opened the wax-sealed letter again. My eyes caught on a line I hadn't noticed before. "Claire, if they push you to the edge, remember the clause. It will protect you." The clause. I shuffled through the documents again, searching for what he meant. Finally, at the bottom of the will, I found it. A no-contest clause. My breath caught as I read the words. Anyone who challenged the will would forfeit their share entirely. I pressed a hand to my chest, my heart racing. Michael had been meticulous, more than I realized. He hadn't only left me the farm, he had built a safeguard strong enough to strip his family of everything if they tried to take it. The knowledge steadied me, but it also frightened me. If Howard learned of this, his fury would know no bounds. He had already poisoned Daniel against me with talk of blood. What would he do if he knew Michael had left him nothing at all? The next day, I found proof of just that. A neighbor stopped me at the market, her voice lowered. "Howard's been telling folks you tricked Michael into leaving it all. He's spreading it everywhere." I forced a smile I didn't feel. People will believe what they want. But when I got home, I sank into Frank's old chair, my hands shaking. Gossip was powerful here. It could destroy reputations faster than any gavel, and I had no way to silence it except the truth Michael had left behind. That night, Daniel came to the farmhouse again. His eyes were weary, his voice tight. "Dad says you've got something hidden, something that proves we're not entitled to anything. Is it true?" I froze. The letter in the desk drawer felt like it was burning a hole through the wood. "What do you mean?" I asked carefully. He shook his head. "I don't know. He just says Michael had secrets, that you're keeping them." I swallowed hard. "Your brother loved you, Daniel. That's the truth. Don't let your father twist it." But he looked at me with a doubt that pierced deeper than any words. "If you really believe that, then prove it." When he left, I felt the farmhouse close in around me, the walls pressing tighter with every secret I carried. I touched the envelope in the drawer, the no contest clause Michael had hidden, and whispered into the silence, "How much longer can I keep this?" The wind rattled the windows in reply, and I knew the storm wasn't finished with me yet. The days after that hearing blurred into one long stretch of tension. Every time the phone rang, I jumped. Every time a truck slowed on the road out front, my heart pounded, waiting to see if Howard had come to demand something new. The farm felt less like a home and more like a fortress under siege. I tried to keep to my routines, feeding the animals, mending the broken fence, boiling water for tea the way Michael used to, but everything was colored by that looming trial. Howard wasn't waiting quietly. He was stirring the town, whispering poison in every ear. At church, I felt eyes on me, some filled with sympathy, others with suspicion. It was as though my grief had been turned into theater, with everyone taking sides. One afternoon, I stopped at the diner for coffee, hoping for a moment of normalcy. Instead, I heard Howard's voice drifting from a corner booth. He was telling anyone who'd listen that I had tricked Michael into signing papers when he was too sick to understand. "She wants it all for herself," he said. "Doesn't care about family, doesn't care about blood." The words burned hot in my chest. I set my coffee down untouched and walked out before I did something I'd regret. Outside, the cold air slapped my face, but it didn't cool the fury building inside me. I wanted to march back in, slam Michael's letter down on the table, and shout the truth, but I knew better. Howard thrived on spectacle. What he feared was silence and patience. That night, I opened the lockbox again. The deeds and will were there, solid and sure, and beneath them, the letter with the no contest clause. I traced the words with my fingertip, my chest tightening. It was my greatest shield, but also my greatest risk. If Howard knew, he might burn the whole town down in rage. As the hearing drew closer, Daniel came by again. He looked more worn than ever, dark circles under his eyes. "Dad's losing his grip," he admitted quietly. "He talks about Michael like he was never his son. It's unsettling." I froze. "What do you mean?" Daniel shook his head. "I don't know. He just keeps saying things about bloodlines, about how Michael wasn't cut from the same cloth. It makes no sense." My stomach twisted. Michael's letter echoed in my mind. He resented me long before you entered the family. The truth is, I wasn't the son he wanted me to be. Not in blood, not in spirit. Howard knew. He had always known. I wanted to tell Daniel everything, to put the letter in his hands and let him see the truth for himself. But I couldn't. Not yet. He was too fragile. Too pulled between me and his father. If I gave him the letter now, he might break. Instead, I placed a hand on his arm. "Daniel, your brother loved you. Whatever your father says, don't let him take that from you." His eyes glistened, but he said nothing more. When he left, I felt the weight of both secrets pressing harder, Michael's hidden truth and the claws that could strip Howard and his sons of everything. The day of the hearing arrived cold and gray. I wore Michael's coat over my dress, needing the comfort of his scent, faint though it was. Bill drove us into town, the courthouse looming like a fortress of its own. Inside, the benches were full again. Neighbors craned their necks, hungry for drama. Howard's lawyer wasted no time. He argued that I had manipulated Michael, that I had isolated him, that the documents were forged under undue influence. His words painted me as a schemer, a woman who preyed on her husband's weakness. Cynthia, Daniel's wife, sat behind him nodding, her lips pressed into a thin smile. When it was Bill's turn, he stood calmly and laid the trust and will on the judge's desk. These documents are valid. They were reviewed by independent counsel, notarized and filed properly. The petitioner's claims are based on rumor, not fact. The judge studied the papers, his brow furrowed. "I will need to review these in detail," he said. "We will recess until tomorrow." Howard's face darkened, but he said nothing. As we left the courtroom, Daniel caught my arm. "Claire," he whispered urgently, "what aren't you telling me? Dad keeps saying there's more, that Michael wasn't—" He stopped, his throat working. "Please, just tell me." My heart clenched. The letter burned in my pocket, demanding to be revealed. But the courthouse steps were no place for it. I pulled my arm gently free. "Not here, Daniel. Not like this." His eyes filled with something between hurt and anger. "Then when? Because if you keep hiding it, you'll lose me too." He turned and walked away before I could answer. That night, I sat at the cedar tree again, the cold seeping into my bones. I whispered into the dark, "Michael, I don't know if I'm doing this right. I don't know how much longer I can carry your secrets." The branches swayed above me, the wind whistling through them like a voice I almost recognized. "Hold steady. Always." I closed my eyes, clutching the letter tight against my chest. Tomorrow, I knew, would bring the storm's breaking point. The courthouse was colder the next morning, or maybe it was just me. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the folder Bill had given me. He leaned close as we walked inside, his voice low but steady. "Remember, Claire, all you have to do is tell the truth. Don't let them bait you into their story. We have the documents. That's enough." I nodded, though my stomach churned. I could feel Howard's eyes on me even before I entered the room. He stood with his lawyer at the front, his shoulders squared like a soldier preparing for battle. Daniel sat beside him, staring at the floor, his face pale and tight. The judge called the session to order. Howard's lawyer rose first, his voice sharp and rehearsed. "Your Honor, we submit that Mrs. Martin unduly influenced her late husband, isolating him from his family, coercing him into leaving everything to her. We also contend that Mr. Martin himself may not have been his father's legitimate heir, further complicating the question of inheritance." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. My blood ran cold. The words hung in the air like a blade. They weren't even subtle anymore. Howard was using the very truth Michael had confided in me, the truth I had been so desperate to protect. I gripped the edge of the table, my breath shallow. Bill rose immediately, his face flushed with anger. "Objection! This is baseless slander. There is no evidence to support such a claim. The only relevant matter is the legal validity of the will and trust, both of which are properly executed and binding." The judge banged his gavel once, sustained. "Keep your arguments confined to the evidence, counselor." But the damage was done. The gallery buzzed with whispers, neighbors craning their necks, eyes darting toward me with suspicion and curiosity. Daniel's head shot up, his eyes wide and searching. He looked at me as though the ground had shifted beneath him. When the judge asked if I wished to speak, I stood on legs that felt like they might collapse. My voice shook at first, but I forced it steady. "Your Honor, my husband was clear in his wishes. He left this farm, this house, and the practice to me because he trusted me to carry them forward. He was not manipulated. He was deliberate." Howard's lawyer sneered. "Then why the secrecy? Why the sudden changes so late in life?" I swallowed hard, gripping the folder tighter. because he knew his family would fight him. He knew you would try to erase me, and he didn't want that to happen. For a moment, the room was silent. The judge studied me with tired but thoughtful eyes. "We will reconvene tomorrow for closing arguments. Court is adjourned." The gavel struck, and the noise of the room swelled again. Howard glared at me with pure venom as he turned to leave, but it was Daniel's expression that nearly broke me. He stood frozen, his mouth opening as if to speak, then closing again. When he finally walked out, he didn't look back. Outside, the winter sun was harsh against my eyes. Bill put a steadying hand on my arm. "You did fine. Better than fine. They're flailing, Claire. They've got nothing real, so they're reaching for shadows. The judge can see that." I nodded, but my chest felt hollow. Shadows had power, especially in a town like ours. That night, I lit a single lamp and sat at Michael's desk, the wax-sealed letter spread before me. I read it again, each line digging deeper. He had known his father would never accept him fully. He had known they would try to use that truth as a weapon, and so he had crafted protections, not just for me, but for himself, for the dignity of who he truly was. At the bottom of the letter, a line I had skimmed before now leapt out. "If they contest, show them the clause. It will end it, once and for all." I dug through the stack of documents again until I found it. The no contest clause, clear and merciless in its wording. Anyone challenging the will would forfeit their share entirely. My hands trembled as I realized what it meant. If Howard and his sons pursued this any further, they wouldn't just lose, they would strip themselves of any legal standing. Michael hadn't left them a single crack to crawl through. I pressed the paper to my chest, tears slipping free. He had thought of everything. He had carried the weight of his family's hatred and still managed to carve out a place of safety for me. But tomorrow, when the final arguments came, I would have to decide, reveal the clause and end it, or hold back and risk the whispers consuming everything. I blew out the lamp and sat in the dark, the farmhouse breathing around me, Michael's presence lingering like a steady hand on my shoulder. I whispered into the stillness, "Give me the strength to finish this." The next morning, I woke before dawn, unable to keep still. I dressed slowly, choosing Michael's flannel scarf and wrapping it tight around my neck, as though his warmth could shield me from the storm I knew was coming. The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the quiet house, each second a reminder that time was running out. I boiled coffee but couldn't swallow more than a sip. My stomach twisted with every thought. What if Howard had more than rumors? What if Daniel stood against me outright? What if the judge believed them, believed that I had manipulated Michael in his final days? When Bill pulled into the drive, I was already waiting on the porch, my folder clutched tightly in my hands. He looked at me for a long moment before speaking. "You're steadier than you think, Claire." I tried to smile but failed. "I don't feel it." He nodded. "That's how you know it's real. Come on, let's finish this." The courthouse was packed tighter than ever, every bench filled, neighbors standing along the walls. The air buzzed with whispers that quieted only when the judge entered. His expression was unreadable, tired lines etched deep into his face. Howard's lawyer rose first for closing arguments. He painted me again as the schemer, the outsider, the woman who swooped in and took what didn't belong to her. He spoke of bloodlines, of tradition, of family heritage. Every word dripped with contempt, and though the judge interrupted once to remind him to stick to facts, the damage was in the cadence. He was weaving a story, and I could feel the gallery leaning into it. When it was Bill's turn, he stood calmly, letting the room settle before speaking. "Your Honor, this case has been clouded with rumors and innuendo, but the truth is simple. Frank Martin, he always used Michael's formal name, executed a valid will and trust, leaving everything to his wife, Claire. These documents were reviewed, notarized, filed properly. There is no legal ambiguity. This court's duty is to honor the clear wishes of the deceased." He paused, his hand resting lightly on the stack of documents. Rumors about bloodlines, whispers about secrets. None of that changes the law. None of that changes intent. What matters is what Frank wrote and signed, and that, Your Honor, is ironclad. The judge turned to me. "Mrs. Martin, do you wish to add anything?" My legs trembled as I rose, but my voice came steadier than I expected. "Your Honor, my husband loved his family, but he also knew their faults. He saw how they would try to erase me, how they would call me an outsider. He left me this farm and this home because he wanted me to be safe. He wanted our life's work to continue, not to be torn apart by bitterness. I am not asking for more than what he gave. I am asking only that his wishes be respected." I sank back into my seat, my heart racing. Howard shot to his feet before the judge could speak. "She's hiding something," he shouted, his face flushed. "My son wasn't even truly my son. Ask her about the letter." The room erupted in gasps. Daniel's head whipped toward me, his eyes wide and desperate. "Claire, is that true?" The judge's gavel cracked like thunder. "Order! Sit down, Mr. Martin." But the question hung in the air, heavier than the gavel's echo. Every face turned toward me, waiting. Daniel's eyes burned into mine, searching for an answer. My throat closed. The letter in my folder might as well have been a live coal, searing through the paper. I wanted to scream, "No!" to shield him from the truth, but my silence betrayed me. Daniel's face crumpled, his mouth working as if he'd been struck. "You knew," he whispered. "All this time you knew." My knees buckled and I clutched the edge of the table. The judge called another recess, banging his gavel until the room finally stilled. "We will reconvene tomorrow for a final ruling." The benches emptied in a storm of whispers. I stayed frozen in my seat, staring at the folder in front of me. Bill leaned close, his voice low but urgent. "Claire, you have to decide. Do you reveal the clause tomorrow and end this, or keep hiding and let their rumors eat everything alive?" I nodded numbly, unable to answer. Outside, Daniel stood on the courthouse steps, his face pale and broken. "Why didn't you tell me?" he demanded. My lips parted, but no words came. I had no defense that wouldn't wound him deeper. He shook his head, his eyes glistening. "You've lost me, Claire. Maybe you never had me." He walked away, his shoulders hunched, leaving me alone in the cold. That night, back at the farmhouse, I spread everything across the table: the will, the trust, the letters. The clause stared up at me, merciless in its clarity. If they contest, they forfeit everything. It was my weapon, my shield, my last chance. I pressed my palms against the table, tears streaming freely. Michael had left me the tools to win, but winning meant tearing apart what little was left of his family. Losing Daniel might be the cost. I whispered into the silence, my voice breaking. "Michael, tell me what to do, please." The only answer was the wind rattling the windows, carrying with it the weight of tomorrow. I hardly slept that night. The clock ticked each hour, louder and louder, until it seemed to rattle inside my head. I sat at the kitchen table long before dawn, the papers spread in front of me. The no contest clause stared at me like a dare. If I revealed it, everything would be finished. Howard and his sons would lose their claims. But Daniel would lose more than that. He would lose the last illusions he had about his father, about himself, about where he came from. By the time Bill arrived to drive me to court, I felt hollow, scraped clean of every reserve I thought I had left. He glanced at me as we pulled onto the main road. "You've made your decision." "Not yet," I whispered. The courthouse was packed again, people standing shoulder to shoulder. The air buzzed with tension, as if the whole town knew today would be the breaking point. I kept my eyes on the floor as I walked to my seat, trying not to see the stairs. The judge entered, his face lined with fatigue. "We are here for final statements," he said, after which I will deliberate and issue a ruling. Howard's lawyer rose first, his voice sharp. Your Honor, this matter is about legacy. Property belongs to family, to blood. Mrs. Martin was an outsider who inserted herself into our client's life, and now she seeks to erase decades of family heritage. We urge the court not to let rumor and questionable documents stand above tradition and rightful bloodline. The words were carefully chosen, but the poison in them was clear. I felt the weight of every eye turning toward me, waiting to see how I would respond. Bill stood slowly, his voice calm but firm. Your Honor, what matters is not rumor or tradition. What matters is law. Frank Martin executed a will and trust, both legally binding, leaving everything to his wife, Claire Martin. This is not unusual. Spouses are recognized by law as primary heirs. The petitioner has offered no evidence to invalidate these documents. He paused, then added, This case is not about blood. It is about honoring a man's voice. Frank chose his wife. He chose Claire. The judge nodded. Mrs. Martin, do you wish to speak? My legs trembled as I stood. I gripped the table to steady myself. Your Honor, I have been called an outsider, someone unworthy, but this farm, this house, this practice, these were my life with Michael. Every fence post, every late-night call at the clinic, every meal at this kitchen table, we built it together. I am not asking for what isn't mine. I am asking only for what my husband entrusted to me. My voice shook, but I pressed on. And I have proof he anticipated this fight. He left protections. The gallery stirred, whispers rising. Howard's face darkened. Daniel stared at me, his hands clenched in his lap. I reached into the folder, my fingers brushing the no contest clause. My heart pounded. Reveal it and the fight would be over. Hide it and the whispers would never stop. I laid the paper on the table, sliding it toward the judge. This clause states that anyone who contests the will forfeits their share entirely. Frank wrote this to protect me, to protect what we built. He knew what was coming. Gasps erupted across the room. The judge leaned forward, adjusting his glasses. He read silently, then looked up. This is valid, enforceable, and decisive. Howard shot to his feet, his face red. That's a trick. He didn't mean it. He couldn't have. The judge's gavel cracked down. Sit down, Mr. Martin. Daniel's face drained of color. He looked at me as though I had struck him. So it's true, he whispered, his voice breaking. He left us nothing. Tears stung my eyes. Daniel, he didn't leave you nothing. He left you his love. He left you his name, his life. This clause wasn't about you. It was about protecting me from your father. But he shook his head, his mouth tightening. All I hear is that he trusted you more than his own blood. The judge cleared his throat. I will take all of this under advisement. A ruling will be issued within the week. Court is adjourned. The gavel struck, but its echo was drowned out by the whispers swelling around us. Outside, the winter air was biting, but I barely felt it. Daniel stood near the steps, his eyes wet, his face twisted with betrayal. You should have told me, he said hoarsely. I was trying to protect you, I whispered. Protect me from what? From the truth. His voice cracked, raw and jagged. I would rather have known than be humiliated in front of everyone. He turned away before I could answer, his shoulders hunched as he walked down the steps. Howard followed, his glare cutting through me like a blade. I stood frozen on the courthouse steps, the world blurring around me. The clause had ended the legal fight, but the cost was written in Daniel's eyes. I had won, but I wasn't sure what victory meant anymore. That night, I sat alone at the cedar tree, the cold seeping into my bones. I pressed Michael's letter against my chest and whispered into the dark, I've done what you asked. I've held steady, but I don't know if I can hold on to him. The branches swayed above me, and for a fleeting moment, I thought I felt Michael's presence again, steady and sure. But the silence that followed was heavier than any comfort. The farmhouse felt unbearably quiet after that day in court. Even the tick of the kitchen clock seemed louder, sharper, as if reminding me of everything I could no longer escape. I tried to busy myself with chores. The animals needed feeding, the stove needed wood, but every moment Daniel's face haunted me. The way he had looked at me, wounded and betrayed, cut deeper than anything Howard could say. That evening, I found myself at Michael's desk again. The no contest clause lay where I had left it, its words as final as a gavel strike. I should have felt secure. I had the law on my side now, and the judge would see it through. But instead, all I felt was hollow. Winning on paper didn't matter if I had lost Daniel's trust. 2 days later, the ruling arrived by courier. My hands shook as I slit the envelope open. The judge's words were firm and clear. The will and trust were upheld. The no contest clause enforced. All petitions from Howard Martin and his sons were dismissed. It was done. The farm, the house, the practice, everything was legally mine. Relief should have poured through me, but instead tears burned in my eyes, because what I saw behind those legal words was the cost. Daniel, broken. Howard, humiliated. The family torn apart in ways I wasn't sure could ever heal. That night, I sat by the cedar tree again. The letter Michael had written still folded in my pocket. For the first time, I read it aloud under the stars. Claire, if they contest, show them the clause. It will end it once and for all. I'm sorry for the pain it brings. I trust you to carry both the truth and the cost. The truth and the cost. He had known, even as he wrote it, that this would tear open wounds no paper could mend. I pressed the letter to my lips, whispering, I did what you asked, but I don't know if Daniel will ever forgive me. The next morning, Daniel came. His truck rattled into the drive, dust trailing behind. When he stepped out, his face looked older, as if the fight had carved years into him. He walked up to the porch slowly, like a man carrying a weight too heavy. We sat at the kitchen table, silence stretching between us until he finally spoke. The judge's letter came. I nodded. Yes. His jaw tightened. Dad is furious. He says you manipulated everything. He says Michael was never really his son, and now I don't know what to believe anymore. My chest ached. Daniel, your brother loved you. He trusted me to protect what you two built together. That's the truth that matters. He shook his head. But you kept it from me. The letter, the clause. You let me stand in court not knowing. You could have told me. I was trying to protect you, I whispered. I didn't want you to carry the same burden Michael did. Daniel's eyes filled with tears, his voice breaking. I don't know if I can forgive you for that. The silence that followed was unbearable. I wanted to reach across the table to pull him into my arms like when he was a boy and scraped his knees, but the distance between us felt too wide. Finally, he stood. I need time, Claire. Time to figure out what any of this means. He left without another word, the screen door banging shut behind him. I sat alone at the table staring at Michael's papers, my heart heavy with both victory and loss. That night, I walked the fields as the sun dipped low, the sky painted in shades of red and gold. The farmhouse stood behind me, solid and mine at last, yet emptier than ever. I whispered into the wind, Michael. I held steady, but the cost is breaking me. The wind rustled the cornstalks, carrying the scent of earth and memory, and though no answer came, I felt the weight of Michael's presence, steady as the soil beneath my feet. The farm was mine. The law had said so, the judge had sealed it, and Howard's fury could not undo it. But victory felt strange, quiet and heavy, like a room after a storm when the windows are still rattling from the wind. I walked the fields each morning, boots sinking into damp earth, listening for the reassurance I thought triumph might bring. It never came. What came instead was the echo of Daniel's voice. You could have told me. Days stretched into weeks. The town settled, gossip shifting onto fresher scandals, though glances still lingered when I walked into the diner or the market. Howard retreated into silence, humiliated but not humbled, his truck no longer rumbling up my drive. It should have felt like freedom. Instead, the quiet pressed down harder, reminding me of everything that had broken in the process. One evening, as I cleaned the kitchen, I found the wax-sealed letter again, the one Michael had left at the bottom of the lockbox. I had read it before, but something compelled me to unfold it once more. My eyes snagged on a line I had skimmed in my grief. If the fight reaches Daniel, and you fear losing him, there is one more truth you can share. My hands trembled as I read the next paragraph. Michael had left a second clause, separate from the will. It wasn't legal, it was personal. He had written directly to Daniel. You are my son, not by blood, but by choice, and by love. I knew long ago the truth about my father and me, and I chose not to pass that bitterness on. Whatever anyone says, you are mine in every way that matters. Tears blurred the words. All this time, I had carried the fear of destroying Daniel with the truth, when Michael had already written the answer for him. A letter meant to heal, hidden among the documents I had guarded so fiercely. The next morning, I called Daniel. My voice shook as I asked him to come. Hours later, his truck pulled into the drive, slower than before, as though he wasn't sure if he belonged. We sat at the same kitchen table where we had faced each other with so much pain. I pushed the letter across to him. It's from Michael. For you. His eyes widened as he unfolded it. He read in silence, his hands trembling. I watched his face shift, shock, grief, then something softer. Tears slipped down his cheeks, but he didn't wipe them away. When he finished, he set the letter down carefully, like it was fragile glass. He knew, Daniel whispered. All this time he knew. I nodded, my own tears falling freely. And he chose you, just like he chose me. Daniel covered his face with his hands, his shoulders shaking. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then he lowered his hands and looked at me, his eyes raw but clearer than I had seen them in months. I hated you for keeping secrets, but maybe you were carrying something too heavy for anyone alone. I reached across the table, my hand covering his. I was afraid of losing you the way I lost him. But Michael didn't want us to carry fear. He wanted us to carry love. Daniel's grip tightened. Maybe we can start over, for Leo's sake, for ours. Relief broke through me like sunlight after a storm. I nodded, unable to speak. The days that followed were still fragile, but different. Daniel began stopping by again, first to mend the roof, then to help with planting. He didn't stay long, and sometimes we spoke little, but the silence felt less like distance and more like healing. Leo ran through the fields, his laughter carrying on the wind, and for the first time since Michael's death, the farm felt alive again. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in amber, Daniel and I stood by the cedar tree. He traced the bark with his fingers. He planted this with you. I nodded. Said it was where we began. Daniel looked at me, his eyes steady. Then maybe it can be where we begin too. The branches swayed gently above us, and I felt Michael's presence in the rustle of leaves, steady and sure. That night, as I sat on the porch watching the stars, I whispered into the quiet, "We're holding steady, Michael, just like you asked, and somehow we're still here." The farmhouse glowed behind me. The cedar tree stood tall in the distance, and though grief would always live in my chest, so would love. And love, I realized, was the stronger of the two. Looking back, I realized the greatest inheritance Michael left me wasn't land or a house, but the truth that love is stronger than blood, and family is built by choice. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to Tears Within and share in the comments where you're listening from. I'd love to hear from you.